Chapter 1. The silver-haired angel invades my home. A gentle breeze infiltrated the mansion, carrying whispers of fallen leaves, while the autumn sun cast its soft, golden glow upon the desk. Beside it, a petite mirror reflected the elegant visage of a young man with ebony hair, piercing black eyes, a regal nose, and fair skin, all exuding an air of nobility. At this moment, he was fervently scribbling away, fully engrossed in his task, the pen gripped tightly in his hand as he sketched intricate designs upon the pages of his notebook. Soon was diligently studying magic, not merely due to the assignments from the academy, but rather motivated by a seemingly trivial concern. If Soon failed to master even a single spell, his life would be forfeit. Why can't I learn? Why? Beads of sweat trickled down Soon's forehead as he grappled with the formulas of magic, increasingly feeling as though he could not grasp the essence of any spell. This was more vexing than the mathematical problems he had encountered in the past, utterly perplexing. Just a fortnight ago, he had unexpectedly found himself transported into a game, assuming the role of a notorious young noble from the house of Julius. Initially, he had been rather exhilarated by this twist of fate, but it soon dawned on him that apart from the counter spell he had inexplicably acquired during his arrival, he could not cultivate any other forms of magic. Yet, soon Uranus Julius, this inept scion, possessed the family's prestige but lacked any personal power, all the while stirring up trouble in the outside world. He was destined to become a mere footnote among the antagonists of the game's 12th divine, Awakening Day. Before long, various foes would come knocking, eager to deliver his demise. These included, but were not limited to, the common upperclassmen from the academy, a spurned genius swordsman, and a mysterious mage who had stumbled upon an ancient ring. He needed to devise a plan to cultivate his abilities within this limited time frame, or else his life would be extinguished. "Young master, your snacks." The household's golden-haired maid entered the room with a hint of trepidation. Typically, young Master Soon was quite formidable, often scolding her harshly. Yet for the past 15 days, he had inexplicably begun secluding himself in his study, avoiding all company. He even ceased attending the academy, a deviation from his norm that only heightened the maid's anxiety. After all, this was the infamous young Master Soon, a notorious villain capable of concocting nefarious brews to be served in taverns. "It's nothing, just set it aside." Soon gestured toward his desk, his expression softening slightly. He had momentarily feared that foes had come to claim him. Though his maid was afraid of him, she had been taken in by the house of Julius since childhood, and thus could be considered a trusted confidant. Moreover, Soon had granted her ample freedom and a salary substantially higher than the norm, alleviating any concerns of betrayal. The house of Julius was not lacking in wealth. The maid placed the snacks beside the desk and swiftly exited the room. Bang! A few glimmering shards of glass crashed onto Soon's wooden desk, prompting him to turn his head. Beneath the setting sun, a silver-haired girl perched on the windowsill, the unfortunate window now reduced to fragments by her sword. Soon's brow furrowed. Was it truly necessary to shatter a 3-story window? The girl had 6 pristine white wings unfurled behind her, and her azure eyes sparkled with intensity, while her silver hair cascaded like a flowing galaxy. Her diaphanous, white attire fluttered gently, akin to a radiant sun. She stood approximately 1.62 meters tall, wielding a cheap iron sword, and gracefully leaped into the room, her fair thighs adorned with semi-transparent stockings, the sturdy short boots soundly thudding against the patterned floor. Had this been a previous time, Soon would have undoubtedly attempted to admire the alluring arch of her foot. Yet now, he could only sit silently in his chair, unable to utter a single word, for she had come to claim his life. "Latina, we are both students of the White Tower Magic Academy, classmates even. I believe there must be some misunderstanding between us." Soon turned his chair, feigning calmness as he crossed his arms, his demeanor unruffled. "Misunderstanding? How can there be so many misunderstandings?" The silver-haired angel, known as Latina, furrowed her brow, her voice laced with fury. "Do you know why you were destined to die here today?" Soon shook his head. "I do not know." To be frank, he genuinely had no idea why this angel sought to slay him. The original Soon had merely been a side character destined to meet a swift demise, his sole purpose to incite his father's wrath and propel the main storyline forward. How could he possibly fathom the myriad of transgressions committed by the scoundrel Soon? There were indeed far too many. Soon could only recall fragments of information about the angel before him. Latina, a mythological being concealed within human society, had been living in dire straits, often seeking part-time work to make ends meet while attending the White Tower Magic Academy. Her true identity was that of a rare light angel, who, fearing capture and coercion by humans, had never revealed her true form. And today, Latina had flown into his home in her angelic guise to take his life, which could only imply one thing. Soon it genuinely crossed her. Do you recall 3 years ago, on Christmas Eve, when you and a group of people destroyed that abandoned wooden house? Soon was taken aback. Was she truly holding a grudge from 3 years ago? At that time, he hadn't even been playing this game surely. This was a bit excessive. Latina continued her accusation, her voice rising in intensity. That was my temporary residence. Do you know that I returned from work with some apples only to find my home in ruins? Do you remember a month ago when you caused a scene at a restaurant, falsely accusing a waitress of switching your drink, resulting in your inebriation? Latina pointed her sword at Soon's head. That was me. I was merely working, and it was your own inability to handle your liquor that led to this mess. Do you know I was dock pay? Do you know I went hungry for an entire day? Do you recall? Seeing Latina prepare to list more of Soon's misdeeds, he shook his head and raised a hand to signal her to stop. Enough. Your mouth must be getting tired from all this talking. Latina persisted. You incorrigible wretch. After hearing you out, I too feel quite naive. If you wish to strike me down, then by all means, go ahead. Soon sighed deeply, his expression calm as he sat in his chair, as if resigned to his fate. Latina's brow furrowed. Soon's nonchalance irked her greatly. In her mind, he ought to be screaming, begging for his life, pleading with her not to kill him. Only then would it be satisfying for her to deliver the final blow. Could he possibly have some hidden trump card? Latina suddenly entertained this thought. Why do you act as though it is all so inevitable? Do you not fear death? Latina questioned, her azure eyes filled with confusion. Soon shrugged his shoulders, a smile escaping him. Because this way, I can die with a bit more dignity. Huh? Latina scoffed, finding humor in her anger. As long as she dispatched Soon today, she could seize quite a sum of funds, framing it as a noble act of redistributing wealth. Her gaze swept across Soon's study. The exquisite vases, elegant lamp, neatly arranged books, and the delectable pastries upon the desk. I toil day in and day out for a meager existence, and you sit here indulging in sweets? Irritated beyond measure, Latina suddenly withdrew her sword and approached Soon, looking down at him with a newfound resolve. I've changed my mind. You will not die so easily. I shall make you my servant. From this day forth, I shall be the true mistress of the house of Julius, and you will toil for me for all eternity. I will draft a binding contract, and should you refuse, I shall beat you half to death before imposing it. Soon blinked, seemingly struggling to comprehend Latina's words. What? You intend to impose a binding contract on me? Such a stroke of fortune? Soon was astounded. Should we take a look further? Thank you, dear reader. Pure love awaits, and let's decide whether to proceed after reaching Chapter 66. Thank you. Chapter 2. Counter Magic. Hello. As a reminder, the protagonist is not anyone's plaything, nor is he brainwashed or controlled. As you progress, you will find that it is a blessing that the protagonist has not been turned into a mere toy in this world, sadly. Having traversed into this realm for half a month, Soon possessed little knowledge aside from a single counterspell. The so-called counter magic is a wondrous form of magic capable of reflecting back all sorts of phenomena, including magical energy, magical effects, and immediately effective contracts. If that angel were to slay him with her sword, he would have to accept his fate. Do you truly intend to go through with this? Soon's face displayed a mixture of fear and uncontainable joy. He was uncertain of how much combat prowess Latina possessed in her angelic form, but she was undoubtedly stronger than him, and having her by his side could eliminate many of his pursuers. She was an angel under the command of the celestial divinity, and her capabilities were quite formidable. Who permitted you to speak? Latina's gaze turned icy as she prodded Soon's chin with the tip of her iron sword. Now, tell me, how many guards are stationed at your mansion? The house of Julius was a count's household, and as a noble scion, Soon relished living alone in his estate, though it did house a fair number of guards. However, they were primarily stationed at the entrance of the estate, guarding the first floor of the mansion. Soon had never anticipated that someone could fly down from the heavens to attempt his assassination. Not many. There are 2 fifth-tier at the entrance and 4 third-tier on the first floor. His maid had just departed, but she lacked any combat prowess and couldn't even contend with Soon, so she likely hadn't noticed the disturbances occurring in his chamber. Very well. Soon's obedient demeanor was quite pleasing to Latina. She hadn't expected that this once high and mighty scoundrel would now have to heed her commands. If no one were to interrupt them now, she could torment this ruffian a little longer and then compel him to sign a contract. With a swift kick, she sent Soon tumbling from his chair, and he let out a pained cry as he rolled onto the ornate floor. Lying on the ground, Soon expressionlessly gazed at Latina, who was seated and preparing to indulge in the delightful snacks brought by her maid. In truth, Soon had not been genuinely kicked to the floor. He had anticipated her move and had feigned the fall, rolling down to the ground with calculated grace. For now, he would placate her. He had no desire to partake in the treats anyway, and soon enough, she would face her own reckoning. Latina eyed the snacks on the table, swallowing involuntarily. It must be said that the delicacies of the nobility were exquisite. The entire spread was worth her monthly wages. Melting in the mouth, the sweetness enveloped her senses, and Latina increasingly felt that transforming Soon into her servant was indeed a sound decision. Proclaiming herself as a maid of the Julius family granted her a legitimate identity and residence, and she could relish these refined sweets daily, possessing the wealth that rightfully belonged to Soon, which was ample enough to last a lifetime. Had she known such comfort awaited, she would have seized Soon much earlier. With this thought, a natural smile graced her lips as her delicate legs, clad in white silk, gently swayed, savoring a whole piece of confectionery for the promising future ahead. Soon, observing Latina as she leisurely savored her treats, found himself momentarily entranced. Poor child, this was likely her first encounter with such delectable delights in her life. If only Latina were not here to kill him, he might find her utterly charming. Who could resist a vivacious, optimistic little angel? Alas, the misdeeds of his former self had incited her murderous intent, and in Soon's memory, Latina ought to have been exceedingly kind. In his previous life, Soon had rather admired this character. How many heinous acts had his former self committed to provoke such defenses in others? Soon's curiosity only deepened. From now on, you shall never taste such delights again, Latina declared fiercely after finishing her snack, addressing the prostrate Soon. Soon was not unable to rise. He merely appreciated the view from the ground. "Oh," Soon responded dismissively, continuing his lament. "Just grant me a swift, and I cannot bear the thought of not indulging in sweets. Please spare me that." Latina sensed something peculiar about Soon's expression and tone. She furrowed her delicate brows, her small head betraying a great deal of confusion, though she could not pinpoint what felt amiss. Forget it, she dismissed the thought. Her delicate hand extended towards Soon, and a torrent of magical energy coalesced into threads, swirling around her slender, silver-clad figure. "By the witness of the primordial Lord, I inscribe the seal of the contract. I summon you, Soon Uranus Julius, to be bound by the chains of your soul and tethered to your fate. From this moment forth, you shall be my servant, obeying my commands without defiance." A radiant beam struck Soon's mind like a hammer, and he felt as if a mallet was pounding at his consciousness. But then, he enveloped himself in his counter-magic, reflecting it back. Latina felt a wave of dizziness wash over her, gently supporting her head with her hand. Through her blurred vision, she saw Soon gradually rising, yawning as he approached her. She quickly regained her composure and commanded him. "Who told you to stand? Sit down. I command you to sit." Then Latina noticed the way Soon looked at her, as if she were a genius baby. "What? Did you not hear me tell you to sit down?" Latina exclaimed, her heart racing inexplicably. Despite holding the sword and possessing overwhelming magical power, her variety of spells was extensive, yet she felt an odd fear. "Then don't sit instead. Go retrieve all the snacks from your household, and from now on, you shall call me mistress. Do you understand?" Latina had not finished speaking when Soon placed a hand atop her head, gently patting her. "Silly child, just sit down," Soon said with a tone of pity. Latina suddenly found her body unresponsive, and before she knew it, she was sitting on the ground, just as Soon had commanded. Even Latina, despite her usual composure, realized that Soon had somehow rebounded her force contract. The force contract spell was not invincible under normal circumstances. One could only sign it after incapacitating the opponent's spirit. The contract would relentlessly assault the opponent's mind until they yielded. So that's why she felt no resistance. It turned out Soon hadn't resisted at all, simply reflecting the contract back at her. "Call me mistress." Soon's dark, profound eyes twinkled with amusement as he leaned closer, locking gazes with his prize. "And mistress," Latina stammered, her cheeks flushing crimson with indignation as she covered her mouth with her hands, her azure, angelic eyes glaring intently into Soon's. Their eyes met, and ultimately, it was Latina who, feeling somewhat shy, turned her head away. "I advise you to release me at once, or you shall face the consequences," Latina warned, her words not mere bluster. She still held a trump card that could reverse everything. "Even in such a predicament, you remain defiant?" Soon raised an eyebrow, reclining back into his chair, amusedly observing the obstinate silver-haired angel. Latina clenched her teeth, and a clock-like emblem suddenly etched itself upon her chest. She intended to invoke her powers as an angel to rewind time, reverting to 5 minutes prior. Chapter 3. Silly child, starved. With a resounding smack, Latina suddenly felt a jarring impact on her backside, as Soon forcefully pushed her to the ground and delivered a sharp slap. What is happening?